Hi, I'm Eric Hanson, CMO of Mitel, and I'm here with Jim Lundy from Aragon Research. Thanks for joining me, Jim.
Sure thing, Eric.
Good to see you. So just to kick things off, I wanted to just ask a few questions about what you're seeing just in terms of where the market's going next in terms of unified communications and contact center experiences. So we'll kick things off with a quick question on, do you think that enterprise organizations today are sort of rethinking how they're designing contact center experiences or CX experiences in a different way, more tied to integrated workflows versus point solutions?
They're definitely thinking about it. I don't think they're doing it yet, but they're thinking about it.
Like, tell me more.
Well, I think, you can't turn on your computer without some new agentic piece of news. And what our findings have found is that a lot of enterprises, they hear that, but they're worried. And so many of them have not done anything, even with Agent Assist, because they don't think that they can trust the vendor or the agent that's being brought to them. So they're taking their time. We've had to actually help them maybe find some professional services to get the agent to give good answers. So I think what I would say is for a lot of contact center managers, I think the word overwhelmed.
Do you think with agentic versus more broadly the AI topic, do you feel that we've exited the experimentation phase, or do you still feel we're in that mode?
Well, I would say for something real basic like Agent Assist, that should be something everybody should turn on right now. Mm-hmm. And most of the products we've seen do work, and they work pretty well. I think when you get into other agents, it's still very early on deployment. Mm-hmm. You cannot believe what all the influencers and the hypers are saying out there on Instagram and TikTok, because that's just not what's happening.
Right.
Because there's things like errors, there's things like governance. Some enterprises are saying you must turn off the free version or the consumer version of ChatGPT because it's indexing your searches. We found thousands of pages of searches by a bunch of professors at one university, and they're like, "What is going on here?" I said, "Like maybe get an enterprise version, of the thing." So I would say this: the low-code era of building agents is absolutely here. But it's still, I would say, not for the weak of heart. And so we think that just like any piece of software, you need to have somebody that's going to help you with it, somebody that you trust. So I do think the era of low-code building is here, but you still have to test it. Right. And the thing is, I think a lot of small software companies that are now not so small, they've never been through an era of system test. They say, well, here's the release, it's ready to go. It's like, wait a minute. So, how do we make sure it's going to answer the question with about 99% accuracy? Right. Oh, we haven't done that. So I think it's early days. However, the people that have done it, and it's mainly large enterprises, have seen dramatic increases of productivity. So there is a digital labor forecast, and it is real, but it's really 2027 through 2031. I think this year is still the year of enablement, where people are still trying to figure out, who do we work with? Right. Who's going to help us, and who can we trust?
Still foundation then.
Foundation.
And do you think from a theme perspective, certainly one of the things that we're hearing is that rather than the technology or even the implementation in some cases, the bigger theme right now is governance, because they've let it wild a little bit in their organization. They started to experiment, it spread, but they didn't necessarily do maybe everything they should have done from a governance perspective. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say, yeah. We've even done some podcasts where we said, here's the people that will indemnify you, and here's the ones that won't. And then we talk to them like, oh, we're using that one. Right. That's not good, is it? So governance is important. I mean, security is important.
Sure.
But so you do have to have enterprise class products.
Right.
Which means you should work with vendors that are going to guarantee that they're not going to train on your data.
Right.
And some of the better ones, Google, Microsoft, have definitely done that. Right. If you buy the enterprise version, which is not cheap from OpenAI, they will do that too. But there's many that won't.
Right.
And so, I found this open source thing. It's out on the web. It's like really great. No, that's a big no. I would still say it's you do have to do like any piece of software. It has to be enterprise ready. Mm-hmm. And so people are looking for providers like Mitel to help them with that, right? Because you guys do a lot of industrial grade communications, problem solving.
Which is a great sort of lead into the next question. One of the things that was really interesting coming into this week, seeing, obviously I've been talking about it, many conversations with you about it, but the hype or the move towards being more deliberate and thoughtful around hybrid as a strategy, rather than me pitching it, it's coming back to me as, what do you think about this? Which I think is a really interesting sort of transition in the market. What do you think about that? Why do you think that's happening?
So we have said that the SaaS era is winding down, and we've said that since really 2 years ago. And the reason is that SaaS is, it serves a purpose.
Sure.
But it doesn't serve a purpose for everything. If you're a small business and you need to have a CRM, or a large business, you need email. Wow, we moved to the cloud and email like way back in 2010.
Right.
But there's penalties that come with that. People can look at your data, and governments have woken up and realized, wait, we don't want everybody to look at our data. And the other big thing that's now just come to realization is that AI runs closer to the data. So if the data is on your local server, shipping it up to the cloud to process on AI, shipping it back, it's too slow. Right. Kind of the way video games work. You're not going to ship the whole video game up to the cloud and ship it back. Right. You're going to ship the changes. So really, I think the thing that I actually wrote about this last week is that it's not just applications running in the local data center, it's also LLMs running on a local PC.
Right.
We think every enterprise will have to have a lot of horsepower on their desktop, and there's only one reason: cost.
Right.
You want to pay for the hardware, the GPUs locally, you want to pay the vendor for using their GPUs, which they rent to you.
Right.
And renting, as you know, is much more expensive than owning.
Right.
So everybody, including the hyperscalers, are racing to build edge solutions. Obviously, Mitel, you guys banked your future on that, and I think it's a safe bet because that's what's actually happening.
Well, there's also, I think, in the last several years, one thing we're seeing is the sort of bifurcation from prem versus private cloud versus public cloud, including multi-tenant. If the cost for private is not largely dissimilar, then why wouldn't you choose that if all the modern capabilities are there, right? And so we're seeing that as an emerging trend as well, which I know you've written about, to a certain extent also.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sometimes happens, you get stuck, you can get locked in to a public cloud if you use their tools. But I do think that, with a managed service combined with some cloud services, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. I can use some of that, I can use some of this. So architecture matters. It's not as expensive as you think to run AI in a local data center,
right?
And it's going to go down in price.
Right.
So I do think when you look at sovereign cloud, when you look at data sovereignty, when you look at security that you've mentioned a couple times,
right?
And people are looking for trusted providers that can say we can do that for you, and that's why all the hyperscalers are racing to do edge. Right. If you haven't noticed.
Funny, somebody else just announced something with Edge.
Yeah.
So you mentioned security. How important is security and, I would say, business continuity in this new era of communications, especially in high-value use cases or critical industries? What are you seeing?
Well, there's been such a proliferation of mobile devices, end-user devices, end-user accounts, that has become very easy to authenticate somebody and get into your system. So the overwhelming nature of insecure operating systems, people not basically managing their corporate, their private lives, it's a massive issue for companies. Doing the basics like backing up all devices, like all edge devices, they don't do.
Right.
Doing good password management for server applications or managed applications. Just a lot of things that make it the perfect storm for hackers to get into your stuff. So it's the number one thing we talk about, communication security, which people are like, wow, we didn't know that. And we talked before we went on live about, ask your provider how many hops that a call takes before it gets to the other side. And if it's more than 3, then you might have a problem.
Right.
So the problem is nobody wants to talk about it because communication security, content security, of course data sovereignty, data security, but it's still the biggest issue. Your security perimeter is only as good as your weakest link.
Right.
And so that's why people need to understand that it is serious. It's not don't mess around with that. There are vendors that don't have licenses to do communications. They have to license somebody else's product.
Right.
And there's a reason they don't have a license.
Right.
So that's why trusted providers that do more industrial use cases, that's what I would classify Mitel as. You kind of been through all those,
Sure.
and you know like what is involved with that, particularly when you get into mission critical communications. And so, it's something that I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about that. It's like,
Right.
You need to talk about it.
Well, and I think there are a lot of organizations that up until recently have thought either I have to be in this camp, which is pure public cloud, or I have to be in this camp, which is prem. I'm supposed to go over here, but I'm not ready to go over there. And they're not thinking about that blend, which is sort of where hybrid comes in.
Yeah.
And it seems like hybrid for a long time felt like a compromise, but now it's becoming a strategy, right? And
Yes.
in some cases, getting back to security as it relates to communication, that diversity of infrastructure actually helps protect lines of business. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you can have stuff backed up.
Right.
You can have an instance, in a remote data center that might be managed service by a
Right.
hyperscaler. So, I mean, and by the way, that's one of the biggest simple things that people can do is like have a backup,
Right.
of your application.
Right.
You have to pay for that, but it's like, how long can you be down?
Right.
And so, even in banking, the question is, can you be down more than 7 seconds? And a bank really can't.
No.
Nor
can a hospital.
No, a hospital for sure. So that's why I think that redundancy, using basically these are data centers, but using them as part of your architecture, part of your strategy, and so that if you do have that thing happen, that you have a fail safe. It used to be called disaster backup and recovery (DBAR), and sometimes you need some serious money, but it's
Right.
like, can you afford to be down?
Right.
And so if you talk to the operations people, they're going to say no. And so you have to look at it and say, well, for example, would we get prioritized in communications if your other business unit is taking a priority? Like maybe for e-commerce traffic.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's in our terms and conditions. Oh, you didn't tell us that.
Right.
So you have to know your vendors, and it really comes down to, do you trust your suppliers? Do your suppliers trust you?
So last question, just thinking about this era that I think that we're entering, which is about intelligence, continuity, and control. What are the things that you think are the biggest things that we're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years?
You are going to see a lot of increases in productivity because of assistants helping people do work. And it's not going to do all the work. I mean,
Right.
literally, there's a lot of failures, even connecting to the cloud, right? Even like, I'm going to take over your browser. But I think the ability to do the mundane task and have a computer agent, an AI agent do that for you, or an assistant, is a real deal. And I do think that will leads to lots of possibilities. Certainly lots of possibilities with creating apps,
Sure.
modifying apps. But I think the big thing is orchestration and automation. I mean, most of AI is automation.
Sure.
It's not intelligence.
Right. Automated intelligence.
It's basically, it's guessing at the end. Like, I think this is the answer. 98%, this is the answer. But wait a minute, what if it's only 79%?
Right.
So that's why, they're not that smart. It's not sentient. We don't have quantum here yet.
Yeah.
So I would say automation is what people, when you hear AI, people should think automation. And I do think that, you have to understand what it does so you can understand what it doesn't do. And today there's too many people that don't understand what it does.
Right.
So they just say, oh, it does everything,
Right.
when really it does very little.
Right. Right. Well, great. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with me. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Eric.
Eric Hanson from Mitel and Jim Lundy from Aragon Research. Thanks, everybody.